in keeping with the most noble values of our heritage, which relates to the Torah I want to share with you this evening, or this morning, whatever the time is you're watching it. There is a famous, ostensibly debate, or at least discussion, about what the most important principle in the Torah is. This is the discussion between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azzai. The reference to this discussion is, the references are fragmentary. They appear in different places, most notably in Bereshit Rabbah, Genesis Rabbah, the Midrash on the first book of the Torah, and in the Sifra on the homiletical exposition of Sefer Vayikra. On the two verses that relate to this discussion, that the first in sequence being Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam B'Yom Baro Elokim Adam, this is the book of the generations of the human person, on the day that God created the human person, male and female, he created them and called their name Adam. And the other, the verse on Sefer Vayikra in Leviticus, Va'ahavta re'acha kamocha, Ani Hashem, you shall love your neighbors yourself, I am the Lord. The text of the discussion between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azzai over which or what is the most important principle of the Torah, as I said, is fragmentary and appears in different sequences in these two midrashic sources. Naturally enough, where it appears in Bereshit Rabbah, it's based on the source in Genesis, and therefore it opens with Ben Azzai's reference, which is to the text in Genesis. In the Sifra, it is based on you shall love your neighbors yourself, which is the text that Rabbi Akiva refers to, and therefore it starts with his text. We are indebted to the great medieval commentator, Rabbi Yisachar Ber Katz, also known as Ashkenazi Berman, who is the author of the Matnot Kuhuna, the commentary. He lived in the 16th century, who puts these fragments together and gives us a full text. Not only the text of Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azzai, but also the additional commentary of Tanhuma, because Rabbi Tanhuma is presented, because these texts are fragmentary, it's not clear who he is coming to endorse with his own particular comment. But it's very clear with the assistance of the Matnot Kuhuna. So according to him, the text is as follows. It starts, in fact, with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, you shall love your neighbors yourself, I am the Lord. Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. This is the great principle in the Torah. Ben Azzai is the one who demurs. He says, Yesh klal gadol hemenu. There is something more important to emphasize, and that is that the human being is created in the divine image, apropos the text I mentioned. Then Rabbi Tanhuma comes, and he adds on, Im asita ken, if you did so, and we have to, going back to Ben Azzai says that there is a greater principle in the Torah, which is that the human being is created in the divine image, shelotoma, so that you should not say, mipnei she kalalti yitkalel chaverei imi, because I was cursed, so let my fellow be cursed with me, because I was humiliated, disregarded, let my fellow also be humiliated. And then makes sense that Rabbi Tanhuma comes in and adds, Imasita Kain, if you did so, know who it is whom you are cursing or disregarding, because in the image of God he created the human being. Most people who have referred to this debate in the course of history have actually portrayed this discussion as a debate between the more particularist view and a more universal view. Rabbi Akiva focusing only on neighbor, and therefore very often being understood in a more particular Jewish sense. And people have understood that Ben Azzai's counter response is to make sure that the principle of regard for human beings is a universal one and not only restricted to Jews. But a more thorough reflection makes it clear that this cannot be what the debate is about. Because if you go through the whole of rabbinic literature, if you go through the Mishnah and the Talmud, there is nobody amongst the sages who emphasizes more the principle that the human being is created in a divine image. We know the famous commentary in Pirkei Avot by Rabbi Akiva of how beloved the human being is created in a divine image. And moreover, when he wants to emphasize how serious bloodshed is, he says, and this appears, I think, in the Tosefta, and he who destroys a life, he who spills blood, reduces the divine image in the world, because a human being is created in divine image. So it's simply not plausible to suggest that Rabbi Akiva had an exclusionary, particularist view that needed to be universalized by Ben Azzai. We will get back in a moment to Rabbi Akiva. But if that's not the issue, then what is it that Ben Azzai is concerned about that he needs to demur or add this caveat, this qualification? It's clear now, with the benefit of the Matnot Kohuna, how he presents the debate, what the issue is. So that you should not say, says Ben Azzai, because I was cursed, so let my fellow be cursed. Because, in other words, Ben Azzai is concerned that the danger is that if I make love my neighbor as myself the principle, then I will make my own subjective experience the criteria. I will say, I have to love my neighbor the way I have been loved or have not been loved. Therefore, Ben Azzai comes to say something really important, which is that regardless of my own subjective experiences, I must always recognize that every human being is created in the divine image, and the way I behave towards the other, regardless of their origin and regardless of their own character and personality, is ultimately the way I behave towards God. And thus makes the punchline of Rabbi Tanchuma so clear as to why he is saying it. Therefore, he says, if you do so, what if you do so? If you say, because I was treated badly, so why should I care about others who are treated badly? Know who it is whom you are really treating badly. It's not just the other, it's God himself whom you are treating badly and whom you are disrespecting. This is an enormously powerful message. But it also raises the question as to what Rabbi Akiva's position is. I mean, surely he understands this challenge. And nevertheless, he still wants to emphasize the principle of you shall love your neighbor as yourself as the most important principle in the Torah. In order to understand Rabbi Akiva's position in this, we need to go to the Gemara in Bava Metzia and look at a very classical discussion there between him and Bar Patura with regards to the classical text of two people in the wilderness. And one has a container of water that is only enough for one to be able to get out of the wilderness to safety. And Rabbi Akiva says that chayecha kodmin l'chayei chavercha, your first duty is to preserve your own life, and therefore you should drink it. And Bar Patura demurs, and he says they should divide the water, and one should not see the death of the other. But what is the textual basis for Rabbi Akiva's conclusion that the duty of self-preservation comes first? He uses the verse from the Torah, "V'chei achicha imach," and your brother shall live with you. This is, of course, the injunction with regards to take care for the needy and to provide for the poor. How does he come to the conclusion that you have the duty for self-preservation first? By emphasizing the third of these three words, "V'chei achicha imach," your brother shall live with you. You have to be there in the first place for your brother to live with you. Once we understand Rabbi Akiva's process of his didactic approach towards the text, we can understand his approach towards love your neighbor as yourself. Yourself here is not just, if you like, a pronoun being involved. It actually is an affirmation and an injunction in itself. In order to love your neighbor, you must truly love yourself in the sense that you must appreciate precisely what Ben Azzai wants to affirm, that you are created in a divine image. When you understand that you are created in a divine image, then you are able to far more powerfully recognize the divine image in the other. essentially what Akiva is saying, is emphasizing, is the importance of a positive self-image, which of course is the duty of every parent and teacher to be able to inculcate in our children and in our disciples. And therefore, what Rabbi Akiva is saying is to Ben Azzai, is he's saying, Ben Azzai, I understand what you're talking about, but you're talking about somebody who is not responding to an injustice against somebody else, was disregarding the suffering that somebody else might be experiencing. If somebody does that, that shows that they have a problem with their own self-image, with their own recognition of the divine dignity within themselves. They are essentially expressing that through their disregard to another. But if they really recognize that they themselves are created in divine image, then they will behave in a different way towards every other human being. So essentially, there is no disagreement between Akiva and Ben Azzai. They're emphasizing the same thing. Above all, what Ben Azzai is saying is that tit for tat is an immoral approach. To say, because somebody has treated me badly, I must treat them, or because I've experienced this, then they should experience it, that is an immoral approach. It is immoral to say, nobody cared for us during the Shoah, therefore why should I care what happens to other people or in different countries or elsewhere? Or this particular community didn't care for me when there was an attack on me and mine in that place, why should I care for them? That is an immoral response. The moral response, which is the basis of the Torah, is the recognition of the divine presence in each and every human being, in each and every community. And that both Akiva and Ben Azzai emphasize as the foundation for authentic Jewish morality. Blessings from Jerusalem.